Okay, so absolute monarchy in France, it's fallen. The old world is officially gone. But what happens next? Today, we are diving right into 1791 to look at France's first real crack at building a new government from scratch, the Constitutional Monarchy. So here's how we're going to break down this huge moment. We'll kick things off with the blueprint for this new constitution, then we'll get into who really held the power, we'll explore the incredible rights it promised, decode the visual language of the revolution, and wrap it all up with a pretty sharp critique that questioned, well, the whole thing. All right, so in 1791, the National Assembly finally puts the finishing touches on its new constitution, and its main goal was crystal clear and frankly revolutionary: to tear down the king's absolute power and build a government that answered to the people, or, at least some of the people. The core idea here was a total break from the past. It's called the separation of powers. The goal was to stop any one person or group from getting too powerful again, so they split all authority into three distinct branches: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Now, this diagram, I know, it looks a little complex, but it's basically the wiring diagram for the new France. What's really cool is how power is supposed to flow from the bottom up, from the citizens through a whole series of votes to create the government. So let's follow that path and break down each of these branches. First up, the legislature. This was the National Assembly, and they were the law-making heart of the government. But here's the really crucial part. It was an indirectly elected body. What does that mean? Well, it means regular citizens didn't vote for their representatives directly. Nope, they voted for a smaller group of people who then went on to choose the final members. It's a system with a kind of filter built right in. And it was a big group with exactly 745 members. So how'd they get there? Well, that filter I mentioned was a group of middlemen called electors. So the voters chose the electors, and they were the ones who actually picked the 745 members of the assembly. Next up, the executive. The king was still in the picture, but he was definitely not an absolute ruler anymore. He and his ministers had executive power, sure, but the National Assembly could control them. The king did get one major power, though, a veto. That meant he could block laws he didn't like. And finally, the judiciary. To complete that separation of powers, the judges were made independent. And just like other officials, they were elected. So now you've got power flowing from three different places, all, in theory, coming from the citizens themselves. But all this talk of citizens and voters, it brings up the most important question of all. Who were these citizens? Did everybody get a say in this new system? Well, the answer shows a deep, intentional division right at the heart of this new France. The Constitution literally split the population of 28 million people into two groups. You had active citizens, these were men over 25 who paid a certain amount in taxes, at least what a laborer would make in 3 days. Only these 4 million guys could vote. Everyone else, about 24 million people, including all women, were called passive citizens. And that's exactly what they were, passive, with no political voice at all. And this chart just brilliantly shows the sheer scale of that divide. Out of a nation of 28 million, only that tiny little sliver of about 4 million people got the fundamental right to vote. The overwhelming majority were just left on the outside looking in. But it gets even more exclusive than that. To even qualify to be one of the 50,000 electors, the guys who actually chose the assembly, or to become a member of the assembly yourself, you had to be in the absolute highest bracket of taxpayers. So power wasn't just limited, it was concentrated in the hands of the wealthy. Okay, so we've got a system that shuts out most of the country. But here's the great paradox of this whole moment. This deeply unequal system was built on one of the most revolutionary documents ever written: the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, a document that would become the very soul of modern France. And this is so important. These rights weren't seen as gifts from a king or a government. They were declared natural and inalienable. That means you are born with them, and the government's only job is to protect them. Let's just look at some of these core ideas. It opens with the absolute bombshell that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. It then says the government's entire purpose is to protect liberty, property, security, and, get this, the people's right to resist an oppressive government. And it establishes that everyone, from the poorest farmer to the king himself, is equal before the law. And the radical ideas just keep coming. It declares that ultimate power, sovereignty, comes from the nation, from the people as a whole, not from some king. It guarantees you can't just be arrested for no reason. It protects freedom of speech in the press, and it calls property a sacred and inviolable right, which was a huge deal for the rising middle class. But how do you communicate these huge abstract ideas to millions of people when most of them can't even read or write? Well, the revolutionaries came up with a powerful visual language, using simple symbols to get these big ideas across. The most important idea was freedom, and its symbols were direct and easy to understand. The broken chain, that speaks for itself. It's the image of breaking free from servitude. The red Phrygian cap was even more specific. It's the hat that slaves in ancient Rome were given on the day they were freed, a really potent symbol of becoming your own master. They also needed symbols to represent unity and permanence. The bundle of rods sent a really clear message. One rod can be broken easily, but together the nation is strong. The snake biting its own tail is an ancient symbol for eternity, a promise that this new France was built to last forever. And finally, they created symbols for the new legal order. The law tablet declared that the law is the same for everyone, while the winged woman was the personification of the law itself. Watching over all of it was the eye within a triangle, which stood for reason and watchfulness, chasing away the clouds of ignorance. All these new symbols were there to replace the old scepter of royal power. But not everyone was convinced by all the lofty ideals and cool symbols. A really powerful, critical voice started speaking up from the press, arguing that this whole new constitution had a fatal flaw baked right into it. And that voice belonged to the journalist Jean-Paul Marat. In his newspaper, The Friend of the People, he took one look at those strict voting rules and came to a pretty brutal conclusion. The revolution hadn't given power to the people. It had just swapped one master for another, from the old nobility to the new rich. And that's the crucial point right there in that quote. Marat was basically making a prediction. He argued that the struggle was far from over. He said once the people managed to throw off the aristocrats, it was only a matter of time before they rose up and did the same thing to the new owners of wealth. So this leaves us with this massive question. The Constitution of 1791 was an incredible achievement, built on these amazing ideals from the Declaration of Rights. But with a political system that deliberately excluded most of its own people and handed power to the rich, was this new France really stable? Was it actually built to last? As we're going to see in our next explainer, those tensions that Marat warned about, they were about to boil over in a big way. The constitutional monarchy was not going to last long, and the revolution was about to get a whole lot more radical and a whole lot more violent, leading to the total end of the monarchy and the birth of the French Republic.